According to Robert Kirkman, we will most likely never get a Rex Splode special like we got an Adam Eve special, which is unfortunate, so I decided to write one myself, from the perspective of the villain himself, director Radcliffe. Radcliffe's parents and grandparents were survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre. For a brief outline, the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma was home to what was called Black Wall Street, one of the wealthiest black communities in the United States. In 1921, it was burned to the ground by a white supremacist mob. The catalyst was, surprise, a black man falsely accused of raping a white woman. Radcliffe's grandparents, both maternal and paternal, lost everything in the slaughter, including siblings and parents. They escaped with their very young children, whom they eventually pushed into a loveless marriage after spending their entire childhoods hounding them to be successful. Money couldn't protect them in the white man's world, of course, but it was the best form of revenge they could get, to show the white man that black people deserved their success. They were burned out of Tulsa, but nothing would ever tame their fire. So Silas Nathaniel Radcliffe was born to two highly successful black pharmacists in 1945. Financially successful, but there was no love, just conditioning. Radcliffe's parents ensured he had the best education possible and even fed him certain foods in the hopes it would make him smarter. The closest thing to love Radcliffe got was his parents' assurances that he inherited their fire and it burned brightly in him. There were far more opportunities for black people during Radcliffe's era, since in Invincible, the civil rights movement gained serious traction approximately 20 years earlier than in our world. After World War II, no one could deny the existence of aliens anymore. Metahumans and superheroes of all races, sexes, and overall identities began to operate openly. And when you live in a world where a dimensional portal can open up literally anywhere and spit out malevolent aliens, gods, and monsters, that tends to put things into perspective. A tentative worldwide truce was formed in the late 40s, so there was no Vietnam, Cold War, Korea, Bay of Pigs, or Berlin Wall. Around the same time, an American branch of government was formed that would absorb other branches like the CIA and the FBI, and eventually become the Global Defense Agency, though it wouldn't reach worldwide jurisdiction until about 1968. When he was 11, Radcliffe befriended a classmate, a white boy named Stuart. Stuart was half Jewish, his father having survived the Holocaust. Radcliffe's parents warned him that trusting white people was often fatal, but Radcliffe was adamant that Stuart was different, was like them in a lot of ways. However, he wasn't. Stuart was reckless, never thinking things through, and wanted quick fixes to his problems. Superheroes began to operate openly in America in the late 40s alongside the burgeoning Global Defense Agency. Stuart developed a deep envy and hatred of superheroes since even minorities like women, people of color, and homosexuals could operate openly. They could safely be themselves, but none of them interfered with the Holocaust. At 12, Stuart fell into a gang of older children. One of them was a con artist who attributed his athletic success to a special tonic his uncle developed, a tonic that granted the user enhanced strength and reflexes. Sensing Stuart's envy and gullibility, he sold him 2 vials of the tonic. Stuart immediately took them to Radcliffe and asked him to make a pact with him. They would drink the tonic and become superheroes. They would prove that they belonged in this world no matter what anyone said. Radcliffe was reluctant since it seemed too good to be true, but Stuart called him a coward and even blackmailed him. Drink the tonic or their friendship was over. They both drank and were immediately hospitalized. The tonic was really water, mixed with a few drops of antifreeze and paint thinner. Though they both fell deathly ill, Stuart recovered more quickly than Radcliffe, and when questioned by his parents, he immediately blamed Radcliffe for everything, even saying that Radcliffe threatened him. Stuart's parents pressed charges against Radcliffe's family, and an all-white jury forced them to pay damages that cost them everything. Forced into poverty, Radcliffe's parents became violent alcoholics who had no forgiveness in their hearts for their son. They would beat him with empty vodka bottles, wailing about how he could have turned out so wrong. At least once a week, his grandfather would hold him down while his mother viciously kicked him in the ribs, screaming over and over again, "You are nothing but an N-word." Author's note. Radcliffe's grandfather holding him down while his mother kicked him in the ribs, screaming obscenities and slurs, is horrifyingly based off a true story one of my high school teachers told me. At 17, Radcliffe's parents poisoned him, their poverty having become insurmountable along with their alcohol addiction. They dumped him in a hospital, fully expecting him to die. Radcliffe endured horrific pain, hallucinations, and abuse from racist hospital staff. Nurses laughed at him when he cried during hallucinations, and a doctor even let him lie in his own waste for a day in order to teach the N-word better self-control. Though still sick, Radcliffe discharged himself from the hospital 10 days later and began to make his way home, not wanting to believe his own family would really do this to him. During his trek, he passed by a military recruitment stand. A black recruiter noticed him and asked if he was all right. They had a cagey conversation in which Radcliffe admitted he was going home, to which the recruiter asked him if that would be safe for him. Radcliffe wanted to lie, but couldn't. The recruiter didn't press for details, but gave Radcliffe a business card and told him to come back in 3 days or he would send someone to investigate. And if he couldn't go home, well, the Navy could really use him. Radcliffe made it home and his grandfather answered the door. His eyes widened in shock, but then he scowled and said, "Ain't you supposed to be dead?" His mother and father stood behind him, pale and guilty, but only on behalf of themselves. Radcliffe pleaded to come home, still in denial, but when he took a step forward, his grandfather raised a pistol. He desperately looked at his parents, who couldn't fully meet his eyes, but spoke anyway. "You failed, son," his mother said. "You turned out wrong. We tried so hard and you just turned out wrong." "Yeah, we tried," his father said. "We gave you everything and you just took it all. You turned out wrong. There's no fire in you." His grandfather cocked the pistol and told him to go. "The world ain't gonna bleed over one more N-word, boy," he said. That broke through Radcliffe's denial, and it broke something else inside him. A sudden calm came over him. He narrowed his eyes and demanded $50. $50 and he would walk away forever, or else he would force his way in and they would have to kill him. The hospital staff may not investigate, but, and he flashed the business card he had been given, the recruiter he met would. If they thought poverty was bad, imagine what prison would be like. His grandfather scowled murderously, but told his son-in-law to get the $50. It turned out to be $36, but Radcliffe counted on that. He took the money and walked away, still feeling that cold, single-minded calm. He entered the Navy and excelled in basic training, went to Annapolis, and earned a place in O&I, but that was only a means to an end. After several years, he finally knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted information. He wanted a network. He wanted access to the metahuman experiments that were secretly being conducted by government black ops. One day, he would personally oversee the creation of a superhuman, and it would belong to him and only him. A successful experiment. He would show them. He would show them all. Radcliffe continued his battle with racism in the Navy, but it wasn't that difficult in finding like-minded individuals. Superhumans saving the day looked good on paper, but the hard truth was that they were laws unto themselves. They could be heroes, or they could be villains. Even if they could be stopped, they could take or do whatever they wanted for a lot longer than the average helpless human was comfortable with, and the government couldn't exactly enslave the ones that already existed. So the solution was to create and control them, use them as weapons for national security. Radcliffe navigated through naval intelligence, building his network, eventually catching the eye of Brian Fowler, the founder of the GDA and its first director. Pleasant and jovial on the surface, but utterly cold on the inside, Fowler was pure utilitarianism. The greatest good for the greatest number was all that mattered. Empathy had no place in a world where being human was fatal to all the monsters and gods out there. They needed both power and worldwide jurisdiction, and the key to that was having superhumans under strict government control. If a few nameless, faceless souls had to die screaming in an underground lab somewhere for that to happen, so be it. So Fowler was Radcliffe's mentor in utilitarianism, or at least being able to feign it until Radcliffe was powerful enough to call his own shots. Fine, good. He would save lives, rise through the ranks, until he eventually had what was owed to him. He joined the GDA, making enemies and friends alike, including Stephen Erickson, who would oversee the creation of Adam Eve. Radcliffe was eventually granted the title of director of the GDA in 1989 after Fowler was killed in action. Over the next 13 years, the GDA would thrive under Radcliffe's rule. It would have to. Apocalyptic threats would always be the norm, even after Radcliffe left. Someone would have to stay and keep it together. He had many candidates in mind for future director, but at the top of that list was a young field agent named Cecil Stedman. Cecil was brilliant, recklessly brave, and, icing on the cake, vulnerable. Radcliffe extensively studied his profile, grew up in a radical hippie cult, child of rape by a literal Nazi, drug-addicted mother who was almost lobotomized, emotionally abusive stepfather. Even when he joined the military, he was an outcast amongst his peers despite being handsome and gifted. He had no other family other than his mother, who passed away from cancer when he was 30. So not only was he the best viable candidate to become director, Radcliffe could ensure personal loyalty by dishing out grains of fatherly affection. There was one big problem, however. Cecil was not utilitarian at all. No amount of lives he saved would ever compensate for the ones he couldn't save, and he was too morally self-righteous. Radcliffe had a gut feeling this would make him a huge liability, and he was proven right when Cecil shot the Reformed Order of the Freeing Fist while pompously declaring that he would never work with criminals. That would not do at all. Radcliffe had been using them as bodyguards and to train an elite force. They were saving more lives than they took, and if Cecil couldn't see that, Radcliffe was more than happy to show him where his self-righteousness would lead him. He could have arranged for Cecil to have a normal human as a cellmate, but that wouldn't truly test him. Would he continue to stick to his morals, or would he let himself be squashed like a bug? Fortunately for him, he chose compromise. In 3 years, the prison was completely transformed from a death trap into a true rehabilitation center, and Cecil did whatever it took to accomplish this, even arranging for the deaths of 2 sadistic GDA guards and several irredeemably deranged inmates. So Cecil was a successful experiment, and Radcliffe himself was ready. He could finally step down as director and run his own special projects group. Cecil was reluctant, almost to the point of hatred for Radcliffe himself at first, but Radcliffe could see he had also come face to face with his own hypocrisy. He just needed one last nudge. Fowler once told him that being human was pointless when the world could literally end every other week, so Radcliffe put his own spin on that phrase. You can be the good guy or the guy who saves the world. You can't be both. That got through to Cecil, and he took the job. Finding viable candidates for metahuman experiments wasn't hard, especially children, but Radcliffe wanted one specifically born into poverty, one whose parents would be more than willing to give them up in exchange for material wealth. It was a reminder to Radcliffe of the lessons he learned as a child, that familial love was a myth and forgiveness a delusion. These beliefs were more than validated because, out of the 16 families he chose, only 2 refused to give their children to him. Then came 10-year-old Rex Sloane, whom Radcliffe had been monitoring for the past several years and whose father was once a military acquaintance. He had one of his proxies catch the boy stealing, bring him home, and offer his parents any material luxury they could want in exchange for their son. While this pitch had been made many other times, Radcliffe ordered his proxy to be as vague as possible, to just say, "They'll be provided for." 9 families asked little to no further questions before surrendering their children, but Rex's parents were among the most eager to turn a blind eye to their child's potential fate. Radcliffe took a personal liking to Rex, since liking someone was the closest thing to love that Radcliffe could ever feel. There was a fire in him, and Radcliffe told him so as Rex demonstrated a talent for martial arts and gymnastics. He responded well to muscle enhancements, and at 13, Radcliffe deemed him ready for Project Firehand. Rex not only survived the surgery, but possessed much better control than his predecessors. Most of them unintentionally blew themselves up. Regrettable losses. Showering praise and affection onto his successful creation, Radcliffe sent Rex on special missions. There were some very bad people in the world, and they needed to die to protect the innocent. In truth, they were former rivals of Radcliffe, anyone that had potential blackmail material on him, or they were merely favors to business acquaintances. Rex performed admirably, and then he started asking serious questions at the most dangerous time, the time to eliminate his former student Cecil Stedman. Cecil had performed admirably for many years, but now it was time to put the dog down. There was another candidate viable for GDA director, a powerful business acquaintance of Radcliffe's, one who would be more than happy to turn a blind eye to his more socially unsavory tactics. Radcliffe didn't want the whole Pentagon blown up, of course. That would have been stupid and unnecessary. So he had Rex charge a briefcase sent to Cecil with only enough power to take out anyone in the director's office. Radcliffe sent Rex out and waited for the good news. That never came. Radcliffe confronted Rex alone in a private safe house and was met with insolence and defiance. Rage broke in Radcliffe, and he struck the ungrateful little shit who had been handed every good thing that ever happened to him and never had to pull himself up from the dirt like Radcliffe did. But something broke in Rex, too. Years of confusion and burning questions. Unbeknownst to Radcliffe, Rex had become close friends with the pure-hearted Adam Eve, which gave him the strength to finally defy the man he thought was his true father but was really his master. Radcliffe choked Rex, certain that his hold on the boy was still strong enough that he wouldn't really fight back, and Rex unintentionally charged the molecules in Radcliffe's glasses, exploding his entire head. Rex, racked with guilt and confusion, blew up the safe house and ran for it. He was consoled by Adam Eve, but there was still one more burning question he needed answered. Did his parents never care for him, or did poverty force their hand? He tracked them down during Christmas and found Radcliffe had kept his word. They were living in material luxury, happy as can be. Overwhelmed with grief and rage, Rex nearly blew up their house. Until he saw the young children, the siblings he never knew he had, smiling and laughing and being showered with love and presents by their parents. His parents. He couldn't do it. He turned away, and Adam Eve couldn't have been prouder. Rex did what Radcliffe couldn't. He left a dark past behind and chose to be better. Rex never found out who would have been his last victim, and neither did Cecil. To this day, 2 pictures hang in Cecil's office to honor Radcliffe, the man he never stopped thinking of as his true father. So that's the story of Silas Nathaniel Radcliffe, a man who was poisoned twice and then became poison himself. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.